But the other side of hope after faith is that if I can do this, anybody can do it. There's literally hope for anybody.
For a lot of people, they feel alone when they come into the atheist community. They've left everything behind. They feel alone. They feel like the outcast.
The hope after faith has always been you can actually make your way back to a normal life.
At Hope After Faith, our mission is simple.
We want everyone to feel at home here.
Whether you're a questioning believer,
consider yourself spiritual but not religious,
or have moved on from religion entirely,
you're welcome here.
Today's date is December 29th, 2016. This is Hope After Faith. My name is Bobby C., and Jerry D. is taking a well-deserved week off to spend some quality time with his family. So he will definitely be missed tonight. But the very cool thing is I reached out to a very good friend of mine and asked him if he would be our guest host. Because when I began thinking about bringing on a guest host for this week, I wanted a guest that holds the same core values as Jerry and I hold. And the first person to come to mind is someone that I genuinely love and respect. I'm honored to call this man more than a friend. He's family. He is a familiar voice on Dogma debate with David Smalley. He's the founding member of Fellowship of Free Thought in Dallas, Texas, and Black Non-Believers of Dallas. I am honored to welcome to Hope After Faith my good friend, Mr. Alix Jules. Hey, buddy.
Wow, that's you needed a drum roll after that one, not the applause. That was amazing.
How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. How are you?
You know what? After working all day, I think I'm doing okay. Good. I think I'm hanging in there. I'm so glad that you were able to join us tonight. I told you in pre-show, if you had not been able to join us, you were the only person I reached out to. I was going to go at this alone tonight. I'm not even sure what kind of show that would have been, because Ed never takes over for Johnny. Never.
That's true.
You know?
That's true. Yeah.
So I'm not sure what kind of show it would have been tonight, but luckily you came through for us, and I can tell you it is truly an honor to have you as a part of the show tonight. So thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me.
So,
I appreciate it.
So what's new in the world of Alix Jules, especially now that we know that Dogma debate and David and the family are picking up roots and headed to California? What?
Oof, wow. So what's going on? Well, I haven't disappeared from Dogma debate. There are a few things that I do in the background, and I'll still be helping Mr. Smalley with some of those. And the family and I are seriously talking about how we can continue to help grow the Dogma debate brand. For my day job, I travel to California pretty regularly, so I won't totally disappear from the mic when necessary. And David knows how to get a hold of me if there's a really burning topic that he wants to cover or wants me to help with. So I'm going to be available, definitely. And then, of course, there's always my writing. I'm coming off of my writing hiatus again, the beginning of the year. And I'll be back on Pathos, the graffiti wall. Now, what's really interesting about what happened on Pathos is probably one of the larger channels on, of course, they got bought out by or acquired by a company called BeliefNet, which is, fairly large. And they kind of went through a rebranding for the atheist and wanted to say, how do we become more inclusive?
Right.
And it rebranded from Pathos Atheist to Pathos non-religious.
Right.
And that was a little difficult for some of the atheists because atheists feel as if they need a home, which is true. Atheists need a home.
Sure.
But what we wanted to do with that is there are a lot of people, especially minorities, who just don't believe but cannot cannot use that label. The term atheist is still a little toxic for them,
Yeah.
and it's for various reasons. When I talk about me for a minute, because I have no issues talking about myself for hours on end. When I came out, I didn't use the term atheist initially. I knew what it was. I absolutely knew what it was. I knew that I was an atheist. But we're talking about several years ago now, and it's anathema. You start using that label, and your family gets distanced. Your friends are no longer your friends. It's almost like every Black person is dealing with an evangelical family that is just not forgiving. Now that's changing. I'm glad to see that some of that is changing with some of the normalization of atheism and secular humanism that's happening, but that wasn't at all always the case. And so, how do we become more inclusive? Well, we've kind of been almost co-opting the nuns into just the non-religious and atheists and what have you. So it kind of makes sense for us to talk and reach out to those people as well and say, okay, yeah, we're also part of the non-religious family. And, you may not subscribe to a particular label, and that's fine. And we may have very, very similar beliefs when it comes to human values or religious values or non-religious values in this case. Let's not let that label get, between us, because there's a lot more that we can do together than divided. And I find that to be the case, especially with African Americans and Latinos, where it may be hard to build bridges with allies or atheist allies, because you don't necessarily see the natural extensions that are necessary for advancement and progress, where there are certain things we can fall back in the general, African American or Latino community. I mean, some things are universal.
Sure.
So I can't let my label or their label often get in the way. Now, of course, we still continue to disagree on some major things. We're always trying to figure out ways of increasing outreach. But yeah, I think this is going to be a very good thing for many of the readers. It was, I guess, maybe a year ago, I had gotten into a controversial discussion. I think it was the Confederate flag in your neck of the woods, actually. It was in North Carolina.
Yeah.
It was North Carolina. And I had Black representatives that wanted to quote me, and they said, I can't use you I can't accredit you with any of this because you're an atheist channel. I'm like, well, use it regardless, because it's still a very it's a very important issue. And so let's when we start dealing with intersectional issues, sometimes we have to, at that time, like, okay, wait a minute, we may have to reprioritize things, on the fly, because some things tend to be a little bit more pressing at that given time.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
You had mentioned bridge building, right? And that's one of the reasons that I reached out to you, was because I know your values. I know how you are as a person. We've spent some time together, and we've built a good friendship over the last couple of years. And I knew that you were the person that I wanted to be here if Jerry wasn't able to do so, because you and Jerry share a lot of commonalities. Bridge building being one of them, because here we establish a core values for our show. And the three main ones for our show was bridge building, finding common ground and actually building on it, and focusing on humanity and humanism. That's our core values for Hope After Faith podcast, right? And I knew by bringing you on as a guest host that you would fit in perfectly, because you believe in bridge building. You believe in that. You work toward that. That is something that holds value to you. But unfortunately, sometimes you can do your best to build a bridge, and the other people that you're trying to build a bridge with is tearing it down as quickly as you're trying to build it.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that you dealt with when they said, look, we can't use anything you say because you're a non-believer. And it makes it even tougher when you're a black non-believer. I mean, it's hard enough to be an atheist, but to be someone of color and be an atheist is even harder.
Yeah, that's really difficult. And I say that my skin isn't just a little bit darker. It has to be thicker.
Right.
I'll tell you another story talking about bridge building. Finding the right partners is also somewhat difficult. When I look at hunger, for instance, homelessness, and mentoring children are pretty high on my list. And when I look at homelessness, because I've actually been hungry, I've been homeless, I've lived on the streets. When dealing with that, I know that offering someone something to eat is significantly more important than proselytizing at that moment or talking about religion. I don't care right then and there what you believe. I know that you're hungry. I'm looking at your feet and I see gangrene. I know that those children that are laying there with you, they need somewhere to stay.
Right.
I don't care where that is at that moment. I want to get you into a shelter if I can get you into a shelter. And unfortunately, sometimes it's going to be a church. It's just there. I don't want you to die cold and hungry and wondering about God. We can have that conversation after. So when when I do use the atheist label, the secular humanist label, et cetera, you would think that binding core belief that should cut through any type of religious doctrine, is an easy one to get past, but it's not. I have had soup kitchens and other organizations that as soon as they find out that, oh, you're an atheist group, we don't want to partner with you. I said, now hold on a second. I have X number of people that are willing to show up immediately to help you, but because we're atheists, you're going to say no. That's actually one of the more difficult realities of just being a secular humanist in the world that we live in today. And then, just getting people out into the certain parts of town, and you talk about the demographics of atheists versus, non-atheists, or just people in general. Trying to get people to those locations is difficult. And so when you get that level of commitment, and then you have, churches or church groups say, we'd rather not work with atheist groups, that can be really difficult and very trying. So you got to dig deeper and keep digging deeper, because the suffering doesn't go away because you can't agree on either rules or logistics or the really, almost secondary stuff. People are still hungry, homeless, etc. So trying to build those bridges is it is a constant struggle, and people are always tearing them down because there's usually some type of motive. There was I remember a few years ago we had we were trying to partner with they were doing sandwiches like every other weekend for the homeless, and doing sandwiches, feeding, and it was a church. And I said, look, let's if we can find neutral ground that we can do this with, let's do this. And one of the stipulations that we had in the group, and this is where I learned that sometimes you have to really be able to bend.
Sure.
Is we said, is there any way we could partner with this? And the news was, it was one of those times in Dallas where we were getting a lot of attention. We are built not only our billboards, but magazines and interviews, et cetera, with the local atheist community. We have a pretty robust atheist community here. You've got Smalley, you've got Aaron Ra, myself. You have several people here.
It's pretty solid.
And yeah, it is. It is pretty solid. It's amazingly solid for being, right smack dab in the South. And one of the only things that we asked is, could you not proselytize? That was it. That let's do this together. We didn't say that you can't wear your shirts, you can't wear none of that. It's like, could you just not proselytize during this event? And they just flat out said no. That's the whole purpose of doing it. And it was maddening. It was absolutely maddening that you would prioritize something like that over, the real suffering that, even according to, their own beliefs, are, they're important, but the people, what about the people? So, bridge building can be difficult, sometimes at best, but immensely satisfying, especially when you see the actual payback and when they let you in. We did a food bank a few years ago, and this is one of my very favorite stories. It was the North Texas Food Bank, and the very first time we were, they had what was called the Full On Faith Week, where they invited people from different faiths to help, work at the food bank, and we were packing and repackaging food, and it was all about trying to make as many pallets that could be distributed to other soup kitchens and food banks across North Texas. And we actually fought to get an invitation. And, we had a couple of people say, wait a minute, you're atheist, you have no faith. So, yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean, you're being very, very literal.
Right.
Very literal. So can we please get an invitation? And it took a little bit, and we did. And the first year that we were there, we had a small group of people we had about 80 people show up, which was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's not a small group.
Well, exactly. It's not okay. So relative to everyone else, no, it absolutely is not a small group. It's the size of a good church crowd, I guess. We by no means were the largest group that year. And the magic that happened wasn't at the end of it when we were, packaging and counting and doing all that. It was all of the bumping and work that was happening between the groups. That was a lot of magic, because I had people walk up to me and they wait, how are you an atheist? Right. So black churches, white. I mean, it just came out, how are you an atheist? They're like, well, I just am. And many of the conversations that were spawned because of it is like, well, what exactly do you believe? And of course, the question about monkeys always comes up.
Of course.
But of course. And what about devil and sin? What do you believe about that? And what have you? And just massive amounts of conversations happen. And I know that at the end, when we're exchanging the emails and what have you, several people have since left the church and have explored their own disbelief and doubt. And sometimes you just have to show them that there is an alternative. And there's many alternatives.
Sure.
And they saw that, and that was amazing. So that was the first year that we did it. And I think it was either the second or third year that we did it. We were 150 to 160 strong.
Wow, that's impressive.
That showed up. Yeah, so the single largest group that was there, to the point where there was like you're going to have to start turning people away. And we actually were at the point, like, if anybody else shows up, I mean, we're going to be done in minutes if this continues.
Right. But Alix, just think about what that says. When you go from 80 to 150, people they're watching that.
They were, and it was amazing. I mean, I walked out of there feeling absolutely wonderful, not because, hey, look, not just because we did good, but one of the things that we have isn't just a problem of understanding, but we have a terrible PR issue, right? Because when you take a look at who's in front and some of the conversations that we're having, there's so many other pieces of the human experience that we're not talking about, that quite often theists and believers of various ilk, they are never exposed to what we have in common. It's just we're picking on the differences, and that's tough. And if you can almost force some of those situations where those interactions really happen, even if it seems unnatural at first, you'll eventually break through in terms of communicating and having conversations. You may not break through in belief or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that, but being able to have real conversations with people while you're doing something like that can be very transformative. And it was for several of them. And it was great because I had people that that said outright, I've never been with an atheist before. I've never seen an atheist before. Didn't know what atheists believe. They were taking pictures with atheists. They were exchanging numbers with them. I'm sure there were a couple of hookups that no one wants to talk about, but it was a very real human experience. And I know that we still have a relationship with some of the people that have left, and we see people really interacting with us in, like I said, in very substantive ways.
Sure. Well, see, that's one of the reasons that Jerry and I want to strive so hard on bridge building, because non-belief has such a negative connotation attached to it that mostly what people know about atheists or what they know about non-believers is stuff that they're taught either from the pulpit or stuff that they're taught from other believers. They don't sit down and think about the fact that maybe the secular community is people also, that they don't connect humanism with atheism or agnostic or whatever label you happen to have attached to yourself. They don't equate those two. They don't put them together, right? Because I can remember many times walking through what is Forsyth Park here in Savannah, and we have a relatively large homeless community here in Savannah. Well, every Sunday morning, they know if they meet at a certain location inside that park that there's going to be a local church that is going to feed them, but only after they spend a half hour listening to a man stand on a soapbox and talk about Jesus. Right? They don't think about, hey, let's feed them. Why make them stand there and listen to you preach for a half hour? Why not feed them? And that's the thing that used to bother Ashley and I so badly. And Savannah had gotten to the point, because Ashley and I would make sandwiches, a lot of sandwiches, and distribute them out, right? Well, we almost got in trouble for that, because Savannah's like, well, you can't do that. You need a permit. You need to go do this. You need to jump through these hoops in order just to give people a sandwich. Right? A guy sitting on a park bench that's not bothering anyone. He's got a bottle of water to his name. And somebody sees us handing him a sandwich. We get in trouble for it. But if a church goes out there and the church does it and preaches for a half hour, feel free to hand out all the food you want to hand out. It's not a problem. There's something... Well, there's a lot wrong with that, in my opinion.
Yeah, there are a couple of people who have gotten around that, and there are major pros and cons with that. If you're 501(c)(3) and you're doing charity, you can,
Sure.
in some municipalities that's fine. And then of course we have the advent of atheist churches, and there are a few out there that are actually, close to or listed as atheist churches, and they will partake in the same privileges that other churches do. And of course, you have to have a specific kind of member that is willing to call it an atheist church. But you have other groups that try and do that. But it is very aggravating to that they will almost immediately defer, privilege to a church when other people are doing exactly the same thing or trying
Right.
to do exactly the same thing, and the only thing that separates you is that label.
Exactly. Exactly. Is if an individual or an individual family wants to go out and just do something nice for the community, for the homeless community, they get looked down upon. You're not allowed to do that. Don't do that anymore, right? I can ticket you for that. You get stopped by the police for trying to do something nice for someone else. But it got so frustrating, to Ashley and I. We want to do something, but why do we have to be affiliated with a religious group in order to do it? Now, luckily, there is a large group here in Savannah called the Coastal Atheists and Secular Humanists. It's called CASH, that is doing great things in our community. And if we want to get active, we can get together with CASH. We can do all these things and be affiliated with that group. But an individual, you're not allowed to do that. It just drives me crazy, man.
Yeah,
It really drives me crazy. That and I think that's why bridge building is so important. Look, there's always going to be those people that disagree with the aspect of bridge building. They don't understand why someone who is a non-believer would even want to try to talk with believers or try to team up with them. How else are we going to change the mindset of believers about the secular community if we don't team up with them, if we don't talk to them, if we don't try to be nice to them? How are we ever supposed to change how they think about us? Why do you think it's so important that if you meet someone, we just don't come right out and go, "Hi, I'm Bobby the Atheist." "Hi, I'm Bobby. I'm an atheist. Just thought I'd ruin our friendship before it ever began."
I kind of have that. It's okay. So I lived. This is one of my favorites. I lived next to I've shared this story a couple other places, but I lived next to a Fox News Christian for several years. I'm not kidding.
I work with several of them.
News Christian. I was very, very specific, a Fox News Christian.
Yeah.
And this was several years ago. Wonderful people, really just wonderful people outside of, their beliefs. And, I can attack some of those beliefs without attacking them.
Sure.
But she would come over, her and her husband would come over, like I said, and we would talk, and I never made it known that I was an atheist. And my oldest daughter would actually go over there and babysit their kids. They had 3 of them and two beautiful little girls. And they would go out there and we would play, and we would rarely talk about religion, or better yet, when she would bring up religion, I was well-versed enough in Christianity, at least, to either correct her on, some of her understanding of actual scripture or others, because, unfortunately, when you are a Fox News Christian, it's easy to attack other faiths as well.
Oh, sure.
Just because, and so there were she was, the Kenyan Muslim president, etc. I was like, ugh. Let me explain to you why that can't actually happen, and what the price of apostasy is if he's actually Muslim pretending to be Christian. The second, things like that. I had to really explain. And I explained that as nicely as I could, and I do believe that there are I'm not anti-fireburn. I think that there are times when you absolutely need a fireburn. Sometimes you need, bridge building, etc. I just don't believe that the only way or the best way to reach everyone, and this is it's everyone, is through billboards, right? Because that can only go so far. And it's a declarative statement versus something that is a cooperative experience, which is very, very different because it becomes part of their lived reality. So I guess it was, we went years, I was in magazines and what have you. She never knew. And one day I guess it was a news van that comes up to the house, and they're doing an interview for one of the campaigns, and then they leave. And she texted my wife and she said, was that the news that was at your house? Is everything okay? And since the question was everything okay? My wife responded with, yeah, sure, everything's fine. And didn't really go into it, right?
Sure.
And I guess it was a day or so later, she comes knocking on my door and she says, I saw you on the news. I saw your interview. And I'm like, oh, well, there goes that relationship right there. It's just because it was an African American for Humanism campaign that had just launched. It was 12 cities nationwide, and I was very much speaking out, not against Christianity, but very much in the affirmative of humanism, specifically African American humanism. And she came in, and the first thing that she came up to me, she says, "You're an atheist?" I was like, yes, I'm an atheist. And her response was, "But you're so nice."
That's always the response.
That's always the response.
It is.
And after about a few minutes of really awkward tension and awkward moments, and she says, "Why?" So, well, I didn't think that religion was all that important to begin with, and we talked about it for a little bit, and she said, I personally believe that you're going to hell, but I think you're a great person.
Right.
And except for that little thing that was continuously hanging over our heads, which was, you're going to go to hell. Outside of that, the relationship didn't change. It didn't change. And through additional conversation, she said, I've never known an atheist. I've never, ever met an atheist. And I said, I'm sure you have.
Just didn't know.
You just didn't know.
Yeah.
And it was really funny. And she said, I should have known. I said, what do you mean? You just knew way too much about religion to be a Christian.
Wait, what?
That was, yeah. I was like, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. You knew way too much about religion to be a Christian. And And as I said that, I turned over and I was like, I had a Quran on my table, along with about 5 different versions of the Bible.
Right. It's funny, because I have Christian folks that I work with that knows where I stand as far as religion and everything else. They know where I stand, and they like getting into these conversations with me. And it's funny that you mentioned that she knew you wasn't a Christian because you knew too much about religion. And I have these conversations with these guys, and it always turns to the Bible. Well, I have a tendency to know the Bible better than most people that I know anyway. And we get into a conversation about the Bible or anything that's going on within the Bible, and it's funny because they use one scripture and then I'll use another scripture to counter that scripture out of the same Bible. Their comment to me is always, 9 times out of 10, well, Satan quoted the Bible to Jesus when he was in the desert for 40 days. Right?
Yeah.
Essentially calling me Satan because I know the Bible. Right? It never dawns on them that, hey, I came out of Christianity. You know, sure, I read the Bible. That's why I no longer believe. Was because I read it. You know, and the funnest thing that I do, especially, and I consider these guys friends. So when they consider me Satan, it really doesn't bother me because they know me as a person. They know I'm a good person. So had it been anybody else, yeah, that probably would have got under my skin. But because they know me as who I am, it really doesn't bother me. But I'll pick out certain scriptures from the Bible and I'll ask them, how would you explain this to a 9-year-old girl? Ezekiel 23:20 is the perfect verse for that, right? Where it talks about genitals the size of horses, you know, how she lusts after these men. And I'll present that to them. If your 9-year-old daughter came to you with this particular verse, how would you explain this? Wait, that's in the Bible? Yeah, that's in the Bible. You know, the book that you say is perfect for children? You know? But the back... Go ahead.
It's easy to ignore those. You know, it is, you know, I think that there's so, obviously it's dissonance, but it's really easy to ignore a lot of that. It is constructed in a way where you can truly say, well, that piece is historical, that piece is allegorical. It's one of those, and I don't want to call it a good novel, but it's one of the things that makes a really, really good classic novel. It pulls fictional novel where it pulls from the characteristics and traits of that time, and it just introduce pieces of fiction that are just really that believable. And even if it's not that believable, you can say, oh, you know what? They didn't necessarily mean that. And I remember when my wife was reading one of the Dan Brown books. What was it? It was the one where there are like all these hidden signs and you know, it was nothing but conspiracy. And it was written well enough that when it was released, I remember a lot of people coming out and saying, could this be real?
Right.
And I'm looking at this. I mean, this is so conspiratorial, and but it's so well written that they can easily say, you know what, some of these aspects might actually be real. So I understand why people would say, you know what, I didn't see that, or it's glossed over, or even, because I actually had a small stint in seminary, even when you do cherry pick the Bible, there are certain themes that you're taught that you want to teach too. And to do that, you have a little bit of leeway in terms of the narrative that you want to craft. So your sermons don't have to be accurate. They just have to be mostly accurate.
Right.
They have to, you know, have a message. And what's the message that you're trying to put out there? And it's also the basis of a lot of apologetics out there as well, which is, you know, drives me to my wit's end sometimes when I'm talking to apologists. But I totally understand why people would do that. I just wish there were better ways to combat it.
Well,
and actually get through to people.
Well, see, I can remember many times as a believer sitting down reading the Bible and not noticing those things that when I sat down and read it for the first time with actual, you know, critical thought and critical eyes and sat down and read it, there were a lot of things that I saw for the first time, and I had read it cover to cover several times before that. You know,
Yep.
So I'm reading it, and all of a sudden, why didn't I see this before? You know, and that was something that I had to wrestle with, was coming coming to the realization that these things are actually in the Bible that I had never seen before, and now I'm left to deal with them. And I would go to my pastor and I would point these things out to him and go, okay, what about this? What about that? And I started questioning things. And that's when things took a turn for the worse. You know, because I started questioning things in the Bible. And what made it even worse was that he didn't have any answers. That made it even worse when I'd ask questions and he would give the normal canned answer that you would expect, you know, a pastor to give. But he didn't have any answers for me, or nothing that would satisfy my curiosity anyway. I mean, he had an answer, it was just nothing that satisfied me. You know, or it didn't fit to the question that I had asked, to the point that I was told that I was thinking too much. That
yes,
that
you're overthinking it.
Yes,
yes,
why are you thinking so much? You know, if these are things you can ask God when you're face to face with Him. You know, stop thinking so much. Just take it on faith. That really bothered me. You know, I wasn't 15. I was in my 30s. You know, I'm a grown man sitting in the pastor's office in a chair in front of his desk, asking these questions, pointing to things in the Bible that didn't make sense. Started pointing out contradictions. Well, this says one thing, but then it says this over here. What gives? Well, you just got to take it on faith that it's true. Not a good. That's not really a good answer. Or at least at least it wasn't for me.
I remember. Oh yeah. And well, I started questioning really young. I was fortunate growing up in New York because I had access to other religions. I could almost walk down the block or walk across the street or knock on a neighbor's door and get exposure to other religions. I mean, just like that. Now, I grew up, being in New York, being from the Caribbean. I grew up in the Catholic Church predominantly.
Sure.
But my mother was not. She wasn't happy with the level of schooling and religiosity in Catholic churches and Catholic schools. Mm-hmm. So she decided that the best route for me was to go into Seventh-day Adventist, which is it's a small cult, right?
Sure.
It is. And I went to a school that was a Seventh-day Adventist school. And that was hard because I'm Catholic. And if you understand the doctrine around the Seventh-day Adventist, the Catholic Church is the whore of Babylon.
Sure.
Right. So the picking never happened, right? No, it happened on a constant basis. The teachers were fine, but the kids, and many of them were truly Adventists as well. They just had a field day with me. But that I had this double exposure, and I started to see some differences. Why do you believe this versus why when I go to my church on Sundays, it was St. Mark's, not St. Mark's, it was St. Matthew's Church in Brooklyn, and I would go in there, and I remember talking to Father Peyton and having these questions, and he would give me wildly different answers to some of these questions, like talking about Genesis, like, was there really a snake? And I'm a child and I'm asking these questions, and the answer is, well, that's allegory. That really didn't happen that way. And then of course I'm dealing with, my schooling, and they're telling me, oh no, that's exactly what happened. And so it was really frustrating. Then I actually went from, there were issues with my mother was just tired of what was going on with me, and there was some and the bullying, and because it was just a constant part of my life from pre-kindergarten to the fourth grade. I think it was just every day it was something. And my mother was like, okay, I'll get you out of there. And she still wouldn't send me to a Catholic school because it still wasn't enough. And I had begun to show significant interest in science and mathematics. And in my little head, my prepubescent head, I told my mom that I was going to be the next Galileo.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, not thinking it all the way through. You do realize what happened to Galileo.
Right.
Off for this. And but I felt as if I could somehow manage my faith and manage science and what have you. So she decided that she was going to send me to this wonderful Lutheran school. So I went from a so I went to a Lutheran school. And so my questions they just got completely turned on the side there.
No kidding.
But yeah. But at the time I never met a Muslim, Sikh, or what I thought was a non-traditional Judeo-Christian believer. So
Sure.
Or an atheist. I had never met an atheist. Did not meet an atheist until I got into high school. So I'm still in this Lutheran school, and I'm seeing this, and I've got Jewish friends and Jewish people in my neighborhood, and I'm stopping there and I'm talking to them. They're bringing me to their synagogues to ask, go ahead and ask the rabbi
yeah.
as many questions as you like. And I'm there and I'm asking questions. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. You have to have the answers. You guys were there first.
Right.
So you better have better answers than my Christian.
You're
family.
the originals.
You're the originals. Give me answers. Right. And I remember my rabbi, the rabbi that I spoke to, he says, well, no, we really actually don't believe in any of that. Yeah. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is making less sense to me as this progresses. But again, dealing with the dissonance. And then when I finally got into high school, my world truly got turned upside down when it came to belief. And that's when I really started to have my crisis of faith, because what my mom didn't realize what she was doing is, through all of this exposure, she was setting me up to kind of be an atheist. In retrospect. And I say that only half kiddingly, because she was Catholic, and she ratcheted it up quite a bit. And so she's an evangelical Christian at this point. I'm like, oh boy, did you go the other way? Yeah,
you flip-flopped.
Yeah. And that's where she is today. But yeah, being exposed to all of these different all of these different beliefs, I actually decided, like, okay, Christianity isn't it. There's no way I can be Jewish. And I actually toyed with Islam for about 2 years. And
I didn't know that about you.
Yeah. I am an apostate of damn near every faith.
It seems that way. You kind of went through the gamut, didn't you?
I did. I really did. And I had this wonderful family that really took me in, and they really helped me, to understand Islam. And the problem that I had with Islam, and Islam being the continuation of this story that started, over 2,000 years ago, was the now what? And is there any better answers than Christianity gave me? And the answer is no. The answers that I was looking for just weren't coming out. And although my family was okay with my exploration of Islam, as long as I was a believer, I was okay. Right? You got to believe in something.
Just got to believe in something.
You got to believe in something. And they were okay with that, but it caused a little bit of pain with my grandmother, who was very, very devout. She was she was more Catholic than the Pope. And I am not kidding when I say that, because when, I guess it was Pope John Paul II, I think it was, decided that Catholics could eat meat on Fridays.
Right.
She called him a heretic.
Really?
Oh yeah, she was not kidding either. She was not kidding. I was like, wow.
Well, yeah, but Alix, I kind of did the same thing, brother. When just started diving into other faiths trying to find my place in the world, because I knew Christianity didn't make sense to me anymore. But there were all these other religions that were out there too. So it was just a matter of trying to find my quote unquote home. My mom called it soul searching, right?
Yes.
Trying to find my place in the world. I've heard it called that I was going through a dark night of the soul, was what I was told one time. And I tried, and I tried other things. I mean, I dabbled in Judaism, became good friends with, at the time, my rabbi. There were too many questions there, because part of my problem with Christianity was the first 5 books of the Bible. And well, as a Jew, that's kind of what they study, is the Torah. It's the first 5 books of the Bible. And, it was kind of the same thing with my rabbi. Well, we don't really believe all of that. We think it's this, and this, and this, which was totally different from what my diehard Southern Baptist pastor thought. He took it literal. There was an actual talking snake. Get over it. God can do anything. Right? Why? If God can create the earth, you don't think He can make a snake talk? What's wrong with you?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Exactly. And so, I went from Christianity to Judaism. I never really looked much into Islam. I don't know why. I don't have a particular reason why I didn't. I looked at Wicca. I looked at all these different pagan religions as well, and then finally settled in Buddhism. I'm like, okay, this works for me. There's no God thing that I have to answer to when I die. That Buddhism doesn't have anybody looking over you. You're not going to be convicted for something you think. So that worked for me. And Buddhism became my intro into a world without God. And it worked. And even today, I still hold to a lot of the teachings, because Buddhism was essentially about self-improvement, going inside yourself and finding your true self and trying to improve you as a person. I love that aspect of it. And then Ashley come along, started poking holes in my Buddhism, ruined that. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point where I had looked at everything. I had nowhere else to go. And when I finally realized there's nothing out there for me, that leaves one thing, and that's non-belief. But I can remember being young, 8, 9, 10 years old, wondering why I was praying. Who's listening? How do I know that Jesus is real? How do I know these things are real? I can remember thinking that as a young boy, never brave enough to express them. My parents were the type of people that when it came to, spare the rod, spoil the child, they took that literally. So there was no way that I was going to ever, bring that up to my parents. But I can remember being young and wondering, why am I praying and who am I praying to? I don't know if they're real or not, and even feeling silly at times for praying.
Yeah. I can definitely relate to that. It took me, after going through Islam and, I actually pulled back into Catholicism. Mm-hmm. And I was really very disappointed with what I found in Islam. And I was ready. I really was at the point where I was going to give it all up, but I didn't know what I was going to believe in. And the idea of atheism was still toxic to me. There was just no way I could admit. It was almost like admitting defeat, right? It's like I'm not looking hard enough. And I know that some people have talked about this sense of feeling broken when they would pray and they wouldn't get a response. And why am I not feeling these things?
Right.
I would sit in church and I would hear people. I would occasionally hear people speaking tongues, really, and I would hear people talk about how they felt the Spirit wash over them, and I never felt that.
Right.
And that was really hard for me. And then when I, went through, Islam, still looking for the same thing, and I said I can't give up, and I said, okay, I'm gonna do the Catholic. I got to give the Catholic thing a serious, one more deep, big try. And I decided not too long after high school I was going to do seminary, and I enrolled. And I said I'm just not studying hard enough. I'm not praying hard enough. I am not connecting with the divine because of something that I'm doing. Still me.
Right.
And I finally got through. It didn't take me long after spending time really understanding the scripture, how they came to be, understanding how you can craft the narrative. There was only two ways that I could see myself going, and that was I was either gonna, because there's no way I was going to wind up being a priest, which had been my dream as a child. I wanted to be a priest, and I thought, at least then, being exposed to all of these religions would reinforce my desire to be a priest.
Right.
It was real sense of confirming bias, because like, well, Catholicism has to be it, because
Sure.
why wouldn't it be? And I got in there, and I started with some serious, deep studies all about and around Catholicism and biblical scholarship. And I was either going to be an apologist or I was going to be an atheist. I kind of knew that was going to be the route. About midway into my first year, and I was like, nah, I am not comfortable with the very next step. And I didn't call myself an atheist. I was done with religion. I still believed in something being out there. But I went through this period, and it was kind of a dark period for me, because this feeling of being lied to.
Yes, that was tough for me.
Was hard. That was hard.
Yes, it is.
And yeah, that was very, very hard. And it's interesting. I was thinking about the show today, and hope after faith. For some time, I didn't feel as if there was hope.
Sure.
That my entire world had been turned upside down. I was up, down. What was going on, and how was I going to reconcile who I was without having God be part of me? And it was a little bit more personal. It might have been more personal for me, because I didn't just see God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. When I saw God, the Father, I didn't have a father in my life. And so this idea of someone sacrificing their son for you, I took very, very personally.
Sure.
Someone being there with you and for you at every step of the moment, I took very, very personally. When my mom couldn't make it to an award ceremony or a recital or whatever, and I really didn't know my dad, I knew that God was there with me and for me as well. So how do I reconcile all of that in a matter of the minutes that it took me to realize that I have to give this up. I don't believe in any of this. Now, of course, it was more than just those minutes, but that feeling, that baggage of this newly acquired nihilism that just immediately set in. What's the point? That took me a little bit of time to work through. And it eventually hit me that although no one was there for me, I was there. And I wasn't really alone. I never accepted an award or did a talk or whatever, and there not being people around there that were either congratulating me or encouraging me, or those people were there. Those were real people, and they were doing their best to make a real connection. And I just had to learn to appreciate that. And then I had to do something that went against my being, which was accept that some of these skills or these accomplishments were mine. Well,
Right.
that took a huge level of, hubris is you can't have hubris. You can't have that level of arrogance. You didn't get there on your own. How dare you even mention that? And so you're at a point where you have to now accept that you did. All those hours of study and play or whatever it was, that's you. And when someone says, well, how did you get there? Not being able to say, and I'm very conscious of what I just said, not being able to say, well, I thank God first, was very burdensome initially, because then it just felt as if I was just nothing but arrogant.
Right. Well,
that was hard.
There's a question in the chat room from Scenic City Skeptic. It said, Alex, was there one particular belief or religion that was easier or harder than the others to let go of and stop believing?
I think Islam was actually kind of hard. I think Islam was kind of hard. I think, and this is why I understand why it continues to catch fire in places throughout the Middle East and in Africa. There's this idea of unity and one race, and there just being this massive collective. And, when you, the very first thing that you learn in Islam is submission, right? It is, you must submit to Allah. And when you learn that, and especially if it's done young enough, letting go of that is, I could see that being an identity ripping kind of event. I mean, you're just no longer who you think you are if it's something that happens, almost overnight. And so I would say Islam is really difficult. Going through, being Catholic, I think was kind of easy to let go. In fact, a lot of the atheists that I know that are former Christian, I know a lot of Catholics who are former Christian, simply because the doctrine was a little bit looser, I think, or some of the areas of the doctrine were so out there that I don't want to say common sense, because that's not the right, modern sense is easier to say, that doesn't fit, and that really, I don't really believe that. Transubstantiation being one of them. I don't think many Catholics actually really believe that, although you're supposed to believe that. I don't think they really do. I think that's kind of hard, especially the more, and what I'm finding is the more rigorous or rigid the belief structure seems to be. I'm actually finding that more people are jumping from super rigid beliefs and ideology than the mainstream modern Christian amorphous kind of Christianity that is love thy neighbor. And because so much room, so malleable, that people are making it whatever they need it to be, versus this is what it says, and if you reject it, then walk away. And the answer is, well, okay, I'll just walk away then. So yeah, I think Islam is incredibly difficult to walk away from.
Okay. Now with the show being titled Hope After Faith, and you're sharing your journey, how you eventually got to where you are today. I'm trying to think of the right way to ask this question. Where did you find your hope after faith? Where did you find that hope? What did you find that hope in? Or you understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
to get there, I need to hit rock bottom first. And it's a short story.
Sure.
And it happened on a trip to New York, and I had already known that I was an atheist. I just called myself spiritual but not religious because
Right.
that was an easier thing to explain to people.
And a whole lot more accepted.
It was,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I was an easy sell. I was like,
yeah.
I'm spiritual, but now, oh, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Unless you told that to an atheist, because then they were like, yeah, whatever.
Right. Right.
And there weren't a lot of atheist groups out there for me.
Sure.
In particular, is just I would go to these things and I was literally invisible. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm not. And I didn't use the term atheist until September 13th. It was either September 12th or 13th, 2001. And I remember September 11th happening, and I was in Austin. Of course, I'm in New York, and I have all my family in New York. I'm working in New York. I've got friends and relatives, but I'm in Austin. And I got on a plane, on one of the first flights that actually landed. And it was that day, it was actually not too long after September 11th that I actually used the word atheist, because it was quite liberating. Now, remember, I wanted to be a priest, and I had this almost innate drive to help people. And I just wanted to be able to help people. And, I grew up in New York, grew up in Brooklyn, and I saw death, I saw violence, I saw a lot of people who would have to bury their children for various reasons.
Sure.
And I said, I've got to be able to find a way to alleviate that. And that need never went away from me. It is still very much there. It's just part of who I've always been. And I got to New York, and I was walking around, and I was on my way down to, I was on, I think, Church and Vesey, and it was still very smoldering, and it had really just happened. And I was walking, and I remember seeing people crying in the street. Just really, people just completely wrecked and emotionally just drained. And if I was a priest, I would have had to do two things. I would have had to console these people, which I wanted to do, and I eventually did.
Right.
And I get down there, and some of them praying, and the thing that would have been really difficult for me to do at that moment is the why.
Yeah.
And it was liberating for me. It was the first time that I felt, oh my God, I'm so happy that I'm not a priest, because I would have found a way to justify to these people, one way or another, to rationalize what had happened. And what was unique for me was I was also, I studied Islam. I can Muslim. And the justification from the attackers, I understood that too.
Yeah, that's tough.
And yeah.
Wow.
And having to let that go, was very liberating. And I got down with these people, and I will hold you. I will cry with you. I will talk with you. I will sit here with you. If you need to pray, please go ahead. I'm not a Christian, and the word came out. I happen to be an atheist. And I sat there, and I was able to help. Some was somewhat cathartic for me as well, having seen this and experienced this. Cry with my fellow human beings, and go out there and look for people. I mean, I knew the answers to, why I was there, why they were there. Are we going to find the people that we're looking for? No, we're not. Some of it, yeah. I was very fortunate that, yes, my mother, who was for 30 years had been in Lower Manhattan, and for 20 years was in and out of the Port Authority Transit, and I think it was World Trade Center 3. Used it every single day. At about that time, she just happened not to be there that day, but other people were, and just being able to go through that with these other human beings and make the decision that, okay, there's this tremendous grief, there's this tremendous loss. How am I going to pick up and continue? How am I going to remember these people? How am I going to breathe and continue to walk through life having experienced this? It took me a minute.
Sure.
It took me a minute. But getting up and deciding that I was going to live life without a God. I knew it wasn't there. I knew I know it wasn't there. And not having to go back and draw my strength from any of that was very liberating for me. Knowing that my hands, my works, my tears with these people, that was powerful enough for me and with them to get them off their knees and keep walking. That's where I think I still derive much of my faith or much of my hope from. And it is watching people work together and overcoming some of these tragedies and finding answers and solutions to real world problems. Now, like I said, there's no answer to what happened that day. It's just being able to pick up and move on and deal with the new world and realities that we're in. That was the basis of me being able to overcome this massive gap of what would have been there for me if I was still religious, I think.
It is amazing how the toughest times in our lives is when we find our strength. It is those toughest times that shapes us and makes us who we are. There's been many times throughout my life, and I'm sure others can say the same, that it was during those hardest times that we broke down, that we were at our lowest, was when we actually started to grow. It's amazing to me, and now here you are, you're facing the most horrible thing anybody would ever want to face. Thousands of people lost their lives during that. And I would assume that had to have been one of the lowest points for you, facing those other people that were hurting, being willing to sit down and share that time with them, to wrap your arms around them and just cry with them, right? I can't imagine the amount of strength and amount of growth that had to have been for you.
Yeah. It's one of those things that you actually never forget.
Yeah. But it has got to shape you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
amazing. It's amazing. So, and now here you are. You're this amazing humanist, this amazing person that has a ton of love to give people. Anyone can sit back and listen to you talk and hear it. Anyone who's ever met you, spent time with you, been around you, knows.
Thank you,
guys. What you hear when it comes to Alix, what you hear and what you see is what you get. There's nothing hidden. There's no agenda. It's just pure, just pure compassion, pure love. And that's one of the reasons that I reached out to you, because that is what Jerry and I are trying so hard to make this show. I know there's going to be people that don't like it, because you're always going to have those militant people, and trust me, we need them. They're a very important part of this community, a very important part of this movement, if you will, right? You need all aspects of people. But for this show, Jerry and I said, this is the direction we want to go. This is what we want to try to build. This is what we want to try to shape this show into. And you, Alix, are the perfect fit. And I can't thank you enough for being willing to come on and be my guest host tonight. I mean, this is pretty amazing to me. I started out as a fan, and now I'm proud to say that I'm a friend and a brother. I'm thankful for the time that you and I had to build our friendship. I'm thankful for our friendship, and I'm extremely thankful that you were willing to share a deeper side of your life with the Hope After Faith listeners and with me, and be willing to, like we say here on the show, bear ourselves before the listeners. I thank you for that.
It was absolutely an honor. No one has to ever beg to get me to bear myself, as many people already know.
Angie,
well, I can't leave it like that. Come on.
Angie said in the chat room, Bobby and Alix in the other chat room. Yes, guys, we have two chat rooms. We have the chat room on hopeafterfaithpodcast.com that Angie watches, and we have the chat room in the Spreaker studio as well. As we said in the other chat room, we've had a few people say they hope Alix can come back soon. So I'm hoping that you would be willing to come back and even join Jerry and I sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Just ask. I'll be around.
Yeah, because I know for a fact Jerry loves you, because I reached out to him and said, Jerry, what do you think about me reaching out to Alix and bringing Alix on the show? He's like, that is great. You need to do that. And I was like, okay, I plan on doing it. And it's like I told you, you're the very first person I thought of. And I was kind of hoping that I wouldn't have to do tonight's show by myself, because there's no telling what this show would have been tonight. There's no telling. It's been a long time since I've done a one-man show, you kind of get comfortable. So it means the world to me, and I want you to know that I love you deeply, and I appreciate you, and I value your friendship, and I value you as a person.
Well, thank you very much, brother. I love you too.
Do me a favor. Let everybody know where they can find your blog, where they can contact you, where they can find you. Because I know that there's going to be some people that maybe they lived under a rock, has never heard of Alix Jules, that came out from under their rock and said, hey, who's this guy? That would love to contact you. How can they do it?
Okay, so you can just contact me at Alix@dogmadebate.com, and that's Alix with an I, ALIX, at dogmadebate.com is the email. And like I said, I'm not disappearing from the show. You can also find me on Pathos, and that's the graffiti wall on Pathos. I also contribute to The Orbit, so you can Google The Orbit Alix Jules, and that will bring you up to some of my additional writing. And of course, on Facebook, just take a look for Alix Jules. And I think I'm the only one there with the IX. And if there's more than one, just look for the hair. I've got the hair.
Yeah.
Totally.
AL is all about me. IX, I got it.
IX, that's right.
Scenic City Skeptic said Bobby, Jerry, and Alix would make a great show. I'm glad to hear more from Alix, as I haven't been a follower of Dogma Debate long enough to hear much from him. So I agree, man. We would make a pretty kick-ass team over here.
I agree.
And guys, his audio kind of went out on him, and that's the graffiti wall over on Pathos. I read that blog, and I know that you guys would enjoy. Alix is a very good writer. I'm still trying to dip my hands into it, buddy. I'm still trying to learn how to, write, and the red pen has become my good friend for a while.
I understand. I definitely understand. Yeah.
Well, I have this tendency to write like I talk, so you can only imagine, So, but I'm starting to dip my hands into it a little more. I really enjoy doing it. So maybe one day I'll be as good as Alix Jules. I'll never be as good looking, but one day I'll be as good as you are at writing. This has truly been a pleasure for me. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you very much for opening up and just discussing those things, because I think you said that's something that you haven't really talked about much. I'm pretty sure it's tough.
Yeah, it is. And, my activism tends to be, a little bit different focus, but yeah, opening up is, it's a little difficult sometimes, but I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I did. I think there are couple of people who have more than a couple of people who haven't heard that particular story. So yeah, I'm glad I had the ability to tell it and share it with the listeners.
That's awesome. Well, folks, in closing, please go and spend some time over on our new website, hopeafterfaithpodcast.com. Angie has done an amazing job with that website. Go over there. That is another place that you can listen live. You just go over there. Once we go live, click on the website, and it starts playing instantly for you. Just go to the website. You'll be hearing us. Also, they have, like I said, we have a chat room over there that Angie pays attention to. I tried to do it a couple episodes ago. If you remember, it was a debacle at the beginning of the show, so I don't do that no more because I don't want to mess it up. Remember, if you're an Android user or if you're not someone who goes on iTunes, you can actually go over to our website and you can leave us a rating and a comment right there on the site under the Leave a Review tab. We'd love to know what you think about the show. Whether you love it or hate it. Just be honest. We'd appreciate you leaving that for us. Keep in mind that we do have that website. You can find us on Facebook at Hope After Faith, and same at Twitter. And we also have a closed group that's called Hope After Faith Listener Page on Facebook, which is for people who are maybe not all the way out, or maybe just kind of sticking their head out of the closet looking around, and you want to get together with like-minded people and have conversations and not have to worry about being judged or anything like that. We encourage you to join the Hope After Faith listener page on Facebook. We have multiple people joining every day. That is a group that is growing quickly. Hopefully Jerry will be back next week. Alix kind of had to step in and fill the shoes of Johnny tonight, and I think he did a really good job. I, once again, was the perfect Ed. Yes, I was. I stood up to my goal was to be the perfect Ed, and I'm trying to master that. I hadn't found me a comfortable couch yet, but I'm working on it. So, Alix, thanks again, man. We can't thank you enough. And please, I do hope that you'll be willing to come back on and hang out with me and Jerry more. I know people are already saying that they want to hear more from you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
All right, folks.
It'll be an honor. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and bring tonight's show to a close. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening and just being a part of the Hope After Faith family. We're very proud to have you, and we love you all and appreciate it. Our closing music tonight is from someone who I consider a very good friend. Her name is Shelley Siegel. The song is called House with No Walls. So you can find her music over at ShelleySiegel.com. That's SEGAL, Shelley, SHELLEY, ShelleySiegel.com. You can find her albums over there. She's amazing. And it's an honor for me to play her music for you. For the Secular Media Group and Hope After Faith, until next week, you guys be kind. You be kind to yourselves. We'll talk to you soon.
no walls. You don't wanna leave, 'cause it feels like home. You're sitting in a house with no floor. You can feel the mud seeping in, but you just choose to ignore all the evidence that what you think isn't real. You don't look because you don't like the way it makes you feel. You say you need the shelter to get through all your wrongs. That's why you choose to live in a house with no walls. You're wearing the emperor's new clothes. You think they'll protect you from the world, but how can you be sure you're wearing anything at all? And even when the others tell you that your raincoat is worth more than all the evidence that what you think isn't real,